And welcome to our Myeloma Financial Coach Chapter today. Good morning or good afternoon or maybe even good evening, depending where you are joining us from. We're excited to hear from Diana Valentine today. She's our Myeloma Financial Coach. For those of you that don't know her, I will be introducing her formally in just a moment. My name is Audrey Burton-Bethke, and I am the Myeloma Crowd Community Manager. The Myeloma Crowd Community Program by HealthTree is what you're participating in today. This meeting will be recorded and sent out to all registrants along with the slides 24 to 48 hours after the event has concluded. Let me share my screen. These slides. All right. A special thank you to all of our sponsors: AbbVie, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Genentech, Karyopharm Therapeutics, Oncopeptides, Adaptive Biotechnologies, and Takeda Oncology. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our featured speaker, Diana Valentine. Diana is a myeloma coach specializing in financial help for multiple myeloma patients and caregivers. As a professional financial consultant and former caregiver of her husband who was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, Diana perfectly understands the financial issues facing myeloma patients. Today, we're going to be talking about working with cancer, things to consider before, during, and after treatment. And I have to admit, I read Diana's slides before the presentation today, and I was already learning so much. She's really taken a broad, deep topic and giving you a great presentation. So I'm excited for you guys to hear that today. She has, as we mentioned, a unique and helpful perspective when regarding this life-changing question: do I work? Do I not work? And she will speak today on the rights and the options that cancer patients have when faced with this question. Diana, we're excited to hear from you today, and the time is now yours.
Great, thank you. Can everybody see me?
No, they don't, but do you want them to?
Let's see, just briefly.
Okay, yes, now they can.
I'm glad everybody was able to take the opportunity to sit here and talk. This is a very, like you said, very broad topic, and it could be very difficult to understand. So if you want to take notes, feel free to take notes, and we will be getting this out to you, whoever signed up for this. You can also go to HealthTree. There's a lot of information on there to give you information about disability and things like that. But let's get started. And I want you to not think that it's all just based on initial diagnosis, during diagnosis, or after you've gone through your treatment. All of these things you can consider throughout your continuum of care. So keep those things in mind. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, to work or not to work, that is the question. And you're going to find yourself asking those questions throughout your continuum of care. Some of those obvious needs to continue to work are the need for income, your employer insurance, family needs, and some of the less obvious needs, and this is not inclusive, sense of community, a sense of self-worth, and need for normalcy, which I have found, my husband found that going to work, even though sometimes it was tiring, he felt better at work because he felt like everything was still the same. He still had other people to talk to. He still felt like he was a productive citizen in society. And so it gave him that feeling that he still had something to contribute. So that may be something you might consider, whether it's initial diagnosis, trying to decide down the road if you're going to need to take time off, or if you're going through those questions now, especially if you've taken time off and are concerned about going back to work before all this COVID and everything is cleared up. Okay, next slide. Working with that cancer, things to consider when newly diagnosed and somewhere down the road. Gather all the information you can from your doctors regarding treatment, side effects, and treatment times. Talk to your doctor about your specific job, and review your employer benefits. If you'll need to take time off, can you work from home? Is there flex work available? If you do take time off, do you have sick time, vacation time, FMLA? disability time that you can take, or if there are disability banks or sick day banks that your employer may have, where people may have donated their vacation time, sick time, where other people can use that in their to help offset some of their time off. It's very interesting when you speak to people in different jobs. I speak to people in different jobs or different responsibilities, how difficult some of these things can become. And it depends on and how you're actually, let's go back to the previous slide, how you can maneuver in this workspace. Some of the things you want to sit down and talk about is, if you're thinking you're going to go down this road, having to take some time off, because treatment, you may need to take time off, whether it's short term for a longer period of time, if you did a stem cell transplant, so some of the things you might start gathering, if you have the time to do that, I would suggest you do. It helps keep everything organized. Is how many employees does your employer have? You're going to need that to know if they are included in the ADA, American Disabilities Act, or FMLA, some of those other things, or state provisions that allow you to take time off. What state do you live in? What are your goals regarding work? Do you want to continue to work for a long period of time? I mean, what are your actual goals and your short-term and long-term goals for work? Do you want or need to work through treatment? Do you have financial needs you need to cover? Do you need that income? Is short-term disability or long-term disability going to be enough? Are you eligible for reasonable accommodation? So we're going to go through that a little bit more when we go through the ADA, American Disabilities Act. What are your employer's policies for taking time off? Very important to know. You need to know whether they even qualify for the ADA, FMLA based on how many employees they have and some of the other criteria needed in order to be in that EEOC space. Are you eligible for FMLA leave? That's Family Medical Leave Act. If not, what are your options for working or taking time off? Are you eligible for family and medical leave under a state law? There are states that offer additional time off, and some of them are actually paid. Hawaii, New York, California are some of them. There's roughly 12 or 13. All of the states don't do that. It's one of the big things that forever Congress has been looking at, trying to find ways to give families time off. And so there's always things in the work. You may, over the years, you may have other states that have participated in some of those additional expanded laws. Do you have access to private, state, or federal disability insurance premiums or options? Or will your employer hold your job for you while you receive disability benefits? And there are some criteria regarding taking time off from the FMLA and American Disabilities Act that will cover some of those regulations for employers to keep your job available for you or a like job. And we will discuss that a little bit more down the road. For every stage of cancer, no matter whether you're just diagnosed, you're currently really into treatment, or you are pretty much in the status quo, everything seems to go along quite well, you want to consider who to talk to at your place of employment, when to talk to them, and what do you want to say? So if you're a planner like I am, when my husband first found out he had cancer, one of the first things we thought about is he going to be able to continue to work? And then if he can't for a short or long period of time, again, what does an employer benefits offer? And what kind of things can he do now to anticipate that, so you won't be at the last minute making these decisions? And when you're going to your employer, you've found out who you're going to talk to, you found out what kind of benefits they have, they do qualify for ADA, FMLA, then you need to be aware of what you say, who do you say. And you may have experienced it by watching or seeing other employees go through very similar things. And that could be a really good gauge to determine how your treatment is going to go. Unfortunately, everybody does not receive due diligence and the treatment they deserve. And that is why there are those protections for people, so you won't be discriminated against based on a disability. So a lot of your communication will depend on your familiarity and comfort level with your manager and coworkers. And while I'm saying this, and I will repeat this later on because it's very important, A lot of people will get online and they're conferencing with families to keep up on your treatment and care and things like that. Be aware that whatever you put on the internet, whatever goes out there in the ether is going to be out there. And employers, especially if you're in a profession like I am as a financial advisor, they will go and check those things periodically, and they have to find out, what you're doing and make sure you're in compliance with their laws and state laws or federal laws. So you may be posting things out there that is going to be known to the employer. Is that what you really want? So you might want to be aware of other opportunities to get that information out to people. That is a closed sort of community. So the only people who know that are those people, those family, those friends, and it's not disclosed to everybody out there who has access to everything on you. So please be aware of that, because once it's out there, it's very, very difficult to bring those things in. Okay, so some of the things about when you start disclosing or decide what you need to tell your employer. You are not required you are not required to disclose what your prognosis is. You are not required to tell your employer what your illness is. Only the fact that you may have something you may have effects that may cause you not to do your job the way you're supposed to be doing it. And so if anybody says, well, do you have cancer? What type of cancer is it? And, that is not information you need to disclose to them. So let's go over some of the guidelines, I guess loose guidelines to follow. First, determine if you want to tell your immediate supervisor or if you need to go to HR first. HR knows about HIPAA regulations, and they will not disclose that unless you need that disclosed to your supervisor. So that is where I would start, is with the HR, and give them information. And at that point, they could start determining what you're going to need in order to continue to do your job. And again, you would have discussed this hopefully with your doctor. Your doctor knows what your job responsibilities are, and he could also tell you whether some of the treatments you're going to be getting is going to cause you to be tired. Maybe you have neuropathy. Maybe you need additional accommodations in order for you to continue your job, or you may need time off. So all of these things, discussing with your employer, HR first, discussing with your doctor, so you can have a full understanding of where you are now in your treatment, where you anticipate you're going to be, and understand that the conversation you're going to have with your employer is going to be very fluid, because you can't say, I'm only going to need 2 weeks off, and they think it's only going to be 2 weeks, and you find you're going to need more time off. That doesn't give them the information they need, and it may cause them to be a little bit more skeptical about what your actual illness is, and it may make things a little bit more difficult at work. So make sure that what you're doing is going to be very fluid, that this may be ongoing for a period of time, and it may come, your physical abilities may ebb and flow. So be aware of those things when you're discussing it with your employer, whether it's HR or your supervisor, however you feel fit to manage that correspondence. Next slide. So one of the things is reviewing your insurance and your appeals options. So one of the first things people are concerned about is losing their insurance if they take time off, or if they end up having to leave and COBRA comes into play, which is a lot more expensive than you're staying on your regular insurance, your employer insurance program, because they're picking up a big bulk of that premium. So for many cancer patients, health insurance is most important in enabling them to manage their care. So if you're contemplating needing to take time off, or if you anticipate that down the road you may have to leave employment, make sure you understand all of your options before making a final decision. Look at COBRA, its cost, as well as affordable care options. And remember, right now, you can sign up for affordable care options if you lose your job up until, I believe it's May. I may have extended even more, the 15th of May. So look at those options so you can take advantage of those if you anticipate taking time off or having to leave your job. Review your life insurance policies. If you have an option to sign up, some people have mid-year signups for their benefits. If you have that mid-year benefit options and you cannot get life insurance now because you've been diagnosed with cancer, make sure you can do those things now, because if you can sign up through your job, it's pennies on the dollar, or it may be free to you for some supplemental life insurance. And a lot of those supplemental life insurance policies you can take with you. Keep those things in mind. You don't have to pre-qualify through medical testing through urine or blood. Do you have options to secure supplemental insurance through your employer that is portable, like I just mentioned, when you leave? Review your health savings and flexible savings accounts, because you may need those things if you take time off. If you have money in there, or you can contribute more, that may help you offset copays and deductibles. Understand the Affordable Health Care Act and buying from the marketplace. Be acutely aware of your rights to file appeals, because there are timelines on filing appeals. All health insurance companies must now have an internal appeals process, and all states must now have an external process for consumers to appeal health insurance companies' decisions. And that may be may have outside reviews by doctors, independent doctors. Be aware, though, that a lot of these independent doctors are working for those insurance companies. So if you go down the road, you find you may have to get an attorney. Be aware of what your options are available to you. Next slide. I think we've gone through something. What are your rights of employer? Can we go back a couple slides? Here. One more. Here we are, right. What are your rights as an employee? You have Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, ADA, American with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act. There are state laws reviewing your insurance benefit options before next open enrollment period to consider short-term disability, long-term disability if possible, supplemental life insurance, or long-term care insurance if it's an option, and then the appeals process. We're going to go through some of those in depth a little bit further on. The FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. It may give you time off from work due to your own serious illness or to care for a seriously ill dependent without losing your job. Now, I've had patients ask me, if I take time off to help my spouse, do I get paid with that? Unless you're in a state that provides that, there are very few states that provide that where you are a caregiver. No, you will not get time off for that. You will not get paid for that time off. But it does guarantee the eligible employee to take up to 12 weeks off at one time or in increments, depending on the employer. And this is one of those things, when you gather your information and you anticipate you're going to need time off, don't necessarily feel you have to take it all off at one time, because you may need treatment in intervals down the road, and you can take it off based on treatment times. You can break it up. All of this information, the more information you gather ahead of time, it's going to allow your employer and you to work together to come to a reasonable accommodation or understanding of how you're going to manage your employment and your healthcare at the same time. It guarantees the continuance of health insurance benefits while you're on leave. So if you take the time off 12 weeks, you're not going to lose your health insurance. It guarantees reinstatement of previous position or an equivalent job with the same salary, benefits, and conditions. So they don't necessarily have to keep your job open, because it might be one of those jobs where they really have to fill that, but they have to present you with another job with the same equivalent job with the same salary, benefits, and conditions that you had on your previous. And it protects you against retaliation for taking FMLA. This is a very cloudy area. A lot of us have probably experienced, or some of us may experience, based on age. You feel like you're not being discriminated based on age, but some of these things will be very subtle. If you're to go into a job interview and they're interviewing more than one person and they're seeing you in person, they can look at you and say, well, you're probably not 20 or 30. And they may not tell you they're discriminating on age, but a lot of times it is, but it's just not in your face. So one of the things with retaliation for taking time off, you may be it may be important to you to gather your information. Don't just say, I'm going to take FMLA before you decided you actually need it and when it needs to be done and that you're talking to the right person. And please don't spread a lot of information around to your subordinates or to your coworkers, because you never know who that will get back to unless you've made a decision and you've already spoken to the appropriate, your appropriate reports. Okay, next thing. Next slide, please. Reasonable accommodations. Now, this is where you're going to ask, after you've made done all your due diligence, finding about information about you're going to continue to work, you need to work, you're able to work, and you're going to decide what that looks like. And this is what you're going to bring to the table with your employer to say, these are some things I need to do to continue to work. The definition of a reasonable accommodation is adjustments to your workplace that help you work or continue to work. Only those persons with current disability or have a history of disability and are still experiencing difficulties are entitled to reasonable accommodations. There are limits for an employer to provide reasonable accommodations when it will cause undue expense for the employer. For instance, an undue expense to an employer can't be to say, I need to have an elevator put in so that I can get to the second floor. It may be reasonable for them to relocate your desk or your office or your workspace to a floor where it's easier for you to get in and out or to get your job done. It is not reasonable for an employer to go out and buy a really big printer for you to do your printing job, but they may be able to supply you with a small printer, so you want to go walk back and forth to a printing facility in order for you to get your work done. So there are limits to what an employer can do if it's going to cause them undue expenses. So let's go to the next slide. American Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination based on your actual disability that I mentioned before, a history of a disability, a perceived disability, and that's something people don't even think about. A perceived disability, they look at someone and they may be walking kind of unusually, and somebody may say, oh, they have a disability. So, we're going to prevent them from doing that, or we're not going to let them participate in this. Or you may find there may be discrimination against promotions and things like that, but you cannot be discriminated against as a result of that. An association with a person who has a disability as well, like being a caregiver. And when we're talking about a discrimination against a caregiver is if you're taking time off and you request an FMLA, which you can get based on your employer, if they fall within those guidelines where they have to provide FMLA, then they cannot discriminate against you for hiring, for firing, for promotions, for any of those benefits because you are a caregiver to a person with a disability. If you have cancer, this law also protects you from discrimination in all phases of employment, like I mentioned before, hiring, firing, benefits, etc., and may entitle you to reasonable accommodations, some of those things we spoke of before. Next slide. And very much like the American Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act prohibits employers from discriminating against employees because they have cancer. This law applies only to employees of the federal government and to private public employers who receive federal funds. Some of those private public employers may be a college, a learning institution where they receive funds, or high schools where they receive federal funds. So for more information on the Rehabilitation Act and to find out if your employer is part of that, then you visit www.hhs.gov sites defaults that we have down here on the bottom. Please write these things down. Of course, you're going to get a copy of all of this, this webinar for all those people who are participating today. State laws. There are many state laws that I kind of mentioned before that offer their own laws which may provide even more expanded protections to people with disabilities than current federal laws. including additional time off. Some of this time off may be paid, not only for you, but for your spouse as well. So I would suggest you look at this website. Triage Cancer has a wealth of information for any regarding legal rights, protections, any information you may need regarding cancer, throughout your journey in cancer. So I would suggest you reach out to that, and it can specify which states and what benefits they may offer through their state protection laws. So this is all a lot of information, but I want everybody to understand that because you have a disability and or you feel like you're not ill now, you feel like you're not suffering any kinds of side effects, there may be down the road where you may have side effect, like I said, neuropathy, or you may have a hard time walking, or you may not feel the bottoms of your feet, or your fingers may not, you may not feel the tips of your fingers if you do a lot of typing. So a lot of those things can inhibit your ability to do your job. If you really want to work, please sit down and talk to your doctor about all the side effects you may anticipate, what some of the medications or treatments may cause, what kind of time off that generally people, there's generally they have a general idea what kind of time you may need off, or if you may be able to get accommodations. You could always pull out your employee handbook. Your employee handbook will give you a lot of information about the benefits you have through your employer, who to talk to, and then of course, talk to your HR representative. And if you feel uncomfortable, feel like that may get down to your supervisor, and unfortunately in some instances it does, and not necessarily the best way, then ask your HR person when you sit down and talk to them, say, these are some things I'm concerned about. I am in a process of reviewing my options. I would like to continue to work. This is why I would like to continue to work. This is what's necessary for me. And then say, I'm trying to work on a plan. I would like to work with you so we can have a plan so I can continue to work, to continue to be productive for you. And even if your employer does not offer, do not qualify, they don't qualify or have to offer ADA, American Disabilities, because of the number of employees or things they may have, don't be afraid to ask. Because a lot of employers understand they may have experienced some of the same issues themselves or other family members. So reach out to them. The worst thing they can do is say, no, we can't do that, or we can do this, but we can't do all these other things. It doesn't hurt to ask. If you've seen other employees that you may be familiar with who've gone through illnesses, similar illnesses, don't be afraid to ask them if they'd be willing to share some of their experiences and get some information from them. I would also encourage you that if you do that, and even with your working with your HR rep, to ask them if they can keep all this close to the chest. So you shouldn't have to say this. You shouldn't have to ask people to keep things private, but it doesn't hurt to ask. So I would do that. And I understand that talking to your employer can be very difficult, can be very unsettling, especially if you're one of those people who are private. But at some point, you're going to have to do that. And the more information you gather ahead of time, the better off you're going to be. So remember, the American Disability Act does not require you to disclose your diagnosis, only the treatment effects. Describe to your employer why it's important to continue working, what you know about the treatment and the treatment course at that time. Also let your employer know that things could change so that they will be aware of possible work schedule changes. You should be fluid in your time frame, expectation, and conversations. Stay on this slide before we go through this, because one area that I think people seem to miss, and that is that you can ask for accommodations with technology. If you have a hard time using your pad, there may be ways where you can adjust your computer. They can get stands for your computer. Or if you need to have additional things to help you remember appointments or remember things, tasks for jobs, there's software to help you do those things, accomplish those things. If you need a chair that also has to be able to lean forward to reduce some of the stress or the relief off of nerves or parts of the body that help you continue to work. Those are reasonable accommodations. There's things out there that you may not be aware of. If you go to Triage Cancer, that website, they offer a lot of information to you, things that you wouldn't consider or think about asking. Go out there and do your due diligence. Look for those things because it may help you to continue working longer and be more effective and make you feel better while you're working. Those things are available to you. So let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of surprising. When I started putting all this together, I was surprised that even though the American Disabilities Act has been in effect for over 25 years, many employers, some of the employers that you're working for are not aware of it. And it astounds me that because they're not aware of it, they may be turning down employees who are actually eligible for these protections. So if you don't understand your rights and don't talk to the doctor about your desire to work, you might assume you can't work and decide to take a leave of absence or quit your job only to regret the decision later. So it is in your best interest to do your due diligence, talk to your doctor, get all the information, and then decide who you're going to talk to at work. And then again, ask them for privacy and let them know that you're in the process of vetting your options. Don't just automatically say, I'm going ADA, I'm going FMLA, because you don't know how the employer feels about that. And you don't know if you're going to even need it or not. So I would suggest you do your due diligence, find out everything you can from the doctor, find out a lot of the benefits and the options you have available at work, whether it may be flex time, you can work from home, continue to work from home in the environment that we have right now, maybe work part-time in the office, maybe change your work location. Maybe you need to be closer to the bathroom. Maybe you need to be closer to the lunchroom. Maybe you need to be on a different floor so you don't have to maneuver stairs, closer to the elevator if there's an elevator for your job, or have a parking space closer to the door getting into your employer. There are a lot of things that are available to you. All you have to do is ask. The worst they can do is say no. If you find out they say no and you're actually eligible for some of these things and it's not an undue hardship for the employer, there are other processes you can go through. There are appeals, and there are people you can talk to help you maneuver that problem. Next slide. So these are questions. I know this is a lot of information, and it becomes even more tedious if you get down into the nitty gritty about the American Disabilities Act, the Family Medical Leave Act. Now, the Family Medical Leave Act is really interesting for caregivers in particular. We are going to be doing another caregivers symposium or webinar. Is going to be later on in 7 or 8 days from now. And Audrey will explain this a little bit more before we close out today after our questions. That I encourage you, if you're a caregiver, if you know other caregivers, to participate in, because it's going to give you a lot of information. It's going to give you information where you maybe don't have things taken care of, paid for, and some of the rights the caregiver has. So I would encourage you all to look at that, let everybody else know what options are available out there so they can participate as well. Now, I would like to open this up to questions. Feel free to ask any question. If I don't have the answer, I'll try to direct you to where it can be. It doesn't have to be today. You can either send me an email or call HealthTree. They'll know how to get in touch with me so that we can get all of your answers, your questions addressed. This is when you're deciding to take time off from work, it could be a life-changing event. And so you have to get your information before you do as much information before you make that decision to stop work or to quit work. And that means talking to your doctor and talking to your employer when it's right to talk to your employer and who to talk to at your place of employment. So.
Thank you, Diana. That was great. I really, like I said before, I learned so much, as you went through that, especially, in our case with my husband being a school teacher, that Rehabilitation Act can actually serve for his job since he is technically employed. by the federal government as a charter school teacher. So it's very interesting that there are so many benefits, kind of like you were saying. The ADA has been what in practice for 25 plus years, and there is still misinformation, and there still is lack of communication about what our rights are.
And it's unfortunate, but we all hear about now. We hear about problems that some of the newer companies like Amazon, what some of these employees are suffering and going through. And they are one of those, they are huge employees. So they have their discriminations they have to be aware of as well.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you may find unsavory, and I'm not saying they are, we've only heard of things, but you may find employees who will just automatically turn you down and say, no, no, no. And if you don't stand up for yourself and speak for yourself, advocate for yourself, the only person that's going to get hurt is you.
Yeah.
You know, these employers can say things, and for a lot of employers, it's about the bottom line. It's not about the employee. So do your due diligence, realize what options and benefits and protections you have, and take advantage of them when they're needed.
Yeah, it really comes down to being your own best advocate. And that's why we have this myeloma crowd community program. That's why we have, the different resources out there, is because we want you to be as best educated as you can so that you can be your own best advocate. And I think, Diana, you always do an amazing job during these monthly presentations. We have a question about how does disability and retirement figure in talking to your employer? So, you get this cancer diagnosis and you think, okay, maybe I'm ready for retirement. So how does that conversation work?
Well, those are two separate things, actually. So if you're thinking about retiring, this is a really complex, because so if you are of retirement age and you're thinking about, I'm going to be ill, I'm going to take some time off, and instead of continuing to work, I'm going to retire. So you need to think about, what benefits are you giving up? Are you going to be in a place where now you cannot qualify for Medicare? You're still going to need insurance, which is very, very important. Do you have a spouse where you can go on their commercial care with who's still working? That becomes a very, very complicated question. And if you'd like to reach out to me, I can help you maneuver those things, because it's very time sensitive. If you decide to take just disability through your job, or you can need to qualify for Social Security disability, and you're a year or 2 or 3 away from Medicare, you need to look at this very, very closely, because you don't want to do something and find yourself, oh, I have no insurance. I can't afford the COBRA, which only lasts maybe 18 months. So reach out to me. I'll be glad to get more specific with you regarding your problem.
I love that. Awesome. And we will be providing Diana's contact information at the end of this, but I also wanted to just put in a plug for our Myeloma Coach program. It's a free program that you can connect with people who have either been through a myeloma experience or have expertise in different areas. For example, through the Myeloma Coach program, you can connect with Diana and you can set up a meeting with her to talk about things like this. How would that discussion of retirement go? What do you need to look at before you do it? I think that's a really important point. So thank you. We still have time for more questions. So if you do have those questions, feel free to enter them there. But Diana, while we're waiting for other people's questions, one of my own is, okay, you've experienced discrimination. You are sure that it's not outside the due diligence of it's not too expensive for the employer. What does that appeal look like? Give us a little bit more details about that situation.
Okay, so if you determine that your employer falls within guidelines of ADA or FMLA and they are not supporting you, then you need to go to EEOC, Equal Opportunity Employment Agency. That's the EEOC, and they will have the guidelines of what you need to do in order to file a claim. Make sure that when you ask for that time off, you ask for reasonable accommodations, you've asked for the FMLA, and your job does offer FMLA, or you've asked for, you've looked at your protections under the ADA. Make sure you've asked correctly. You've asked the right person. You didn't just go to your supervisor and say, I need this. And he says, well, do this. And you didn't do this, or it wasn't the right thing to do. Make sure you speak to HR. Make sure you get everything in writing. Make sure the person you spoke to, you have a copy of that. Because if it comes to appeal process, they're going to go back and ask you, what did you do? And you need to have a track record of everything that you've done. I say the same thing for insurance, right? Get everybody you talk to regarding your insurance, your benefits, get the person you spoke to, the time you spoke to them, what they said. If they said, here's a document, have them send you the document. If it's on an email, keep that email, because now you have a track record. All of this is going to help you in any kind of appeals process. You can go to the EEOC field office if you have questions regarding filing a claim under the ADA. Okay. Yeah, you can also talk to American Bar Association. They can give you directions, because if you don't get your satisfaction through the EEOC and you cannot file a claim, you can still file your own lawsuit.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yep.
That's good to know. I think, I don't know, for me at least, there's so much out there for us. And I think it's so easy to just kind of clam up and be like, okay, it didn't work out for me, but it really comes down, and I know I said this earlier, but it really comes down to educating yourself so you can be your own best advocate.
Right. I have seen people, and I have to be honest, my husband and I were guilty of this ourselves. You get so frustrated, you get so bogged down in the time and the effort to try to make sure that you get what's due to you, the benefits, the protections, that it's so easy to give up. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of employers want you to do. That's what some employers will want you to do. That's what some insurance companies, when they're trying to pay off claims, want you to do. They want you to give up, because they are all about their bottom line. They say, no, no, no. But as long as you keep pressing, you come with the right information, and you may have to appeal. Like my son is appealing something. You have to appeal 4 or 5 times. You can't stay within that timeline. Then as long as you stay within that timeline with filing these appeals, and you say, okay, and unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't hurt to drop I need to speak to my attorney about this. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that gets them rolling, because they don't want to spend time, because time for them is money. Mm-hmm. Having to go through this attorney process, or even doctors to go through this attorney process. So be your best advocate. Make sure that you know the law. Make sure you know the benefits and protections, because if you don't know it, then how are you going to argue it to your employer? Yeah. You need to know that. Yeah. Don't walk away from hundreds or thousands of dollars or a job because you got frustrated and gave up, because it's not just affecting you. If you have family at home, it's affecting everybody. Yeah, that's great. Okay, we have a couple more questions. This is fun, so fun, just such a pertinent topic, Okay, so he says, sorry if I missed earlier, but I struggle with how to share my situation with my team. I have over 300 employees, and it is being noticed that I am not as available as in the past. So what are your thoughts on open communication in this type of situation, where it's more has those 300 employees and not sure, if he's ready to tell his employees about this? That's really interesting, because if you are the boss and you have employees that are watching you and they think that you're falling down on your job simply because they don't see you there, you may be at treatment, you may be at doctor's appointments, you may be whatever, then they feel like then you don't have that backup, really. Mm-hmm. So it comes to, you may have a lead, you may have a supervisor that you depend on to make sure those employees are getting those things done. It might be a good idea to round up your supervisors. You may have managers or sub-managers over these people, and round them up and talk to them first, say, this is what's going on. And make sure you have someone who's going to be there, that's going to be able to manage your job when you can't. And that's where it comes to key. You're a key employee, especially if you are the owner of this company or this business. If you are the key employee, you should have made arrangements even before you're ill, to make sure if something were to happen to you, you're sick for a short, long-term period of time, that your business can continue to run. Because your employees may get concerned, oh, is this job going to be quitting? What's happening? Is this job going under? Especially in the environment we're in now. Am I going to lose my job? So they might start questioning. If they notice you're not there, you need to do something if you have, like I said, if you have supervisors that report to you, bring them in and say, this is what's going on. The job will continue. Things are getting done, but there's going to be times you don't see me as often, especially if you're a person they see all the time and all of a sudden you're not there as often. That might be an option for you to look at. Feel free to reach out to, get online to EEOC, reach out to them and ask them how do they handle those situations, because they could probably direct you if you're the owner of a company and you're the one who runs everything. It's almost like, oh no, I'm not the employee, I am the employer. So they will be able to direct you a little bit more on how to handle those situations.
And are you saying EELC or
EEOC.
Okay.
EEOC, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just new to me. I don't know if it's new to anybody else. I wanted to make sure that we understood. All right. Hopefully that answered your question, and I appreciate you bringing that perspective into this conversation. Another question is, are we still protected under the ADA Act if we have not been declared disabled by Social Security? I applied for disability and was denied, though they admitted that I was dealing with an uncommon and challenging cancer.
If your doctor says you're disabled and you're disabled for a period of time, by disabled, it means you cannot, okay. By disabled, it means you cannot manage some of your normal activities. And if your doctor says you can't manage some of your normal activities, because if you're considered disabled by Social Security, you're not going to work, probably.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is when you're working and you're considered disabled, protections under American Disability Act, which means you can be disabled for not being able to function and do all your normal job descriptions based on being completely healthy or whole. So yes, you can be disabled for a period of time, for a long period of time, and they can provide accommodations for you. So it has nothing to do with necessarily Social Security disability. Those are like two separate things.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. And again, thank you for this question, for bringing it up, because, you know, as you just said, if you're declared disabled by Social Security, you're not going to be working. So this is a whole different conversation, and it brings the importance to talking to your doctor and making sure you understand what is coming, or even if you're in the middle of it, what his perspective is. You know, in high school, when they have to write you the doctor's note because you're going to miss a class, this is it on a bigger scale. This is real life doctor time, you know, doctor note or whatever. And I think I just appreciate you saying that in the beginning. And for those that missed the beginning, I just wanted to reiterate that point. That's why you go to your doctor and you say, tell me what's coming and what is treatment going to look like and what's in the future and what can I comfortably communicate with my employer of it's going to change for me. And also an important point that you mentioned that I want to reiterate is you have to tell your employer this is fluid because I don't know how I'm going to react to the treatment, and I don't know how, you know, if I'm going to get an infection post SCT, I don't know, you know. And so I think having either your HR or your employer, you got to have that communication. So I know I'm repeating what you said earlier, but especially for those that missed the beginning, I just wanted to repeat that because it's probably one of the most important takeaways of this conversation.
Right. And in addition to that, Audrey, it's very important when you're talking to a doctor, not just say, you know, am I going to need time off and work? You need to let your doctor know specifically what you're doing at work. Right. If you're the kind of person who's out in the rain or out in the cold and you work with like your supervisor, and you have to go look at where dams may be flooding, or you're inspecting bridges and you can't continue to do that work. You can't be in the sun because of certain medications, or you can't be walking up steep hills and you may end up with neuropathy. You know, these are all the things you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of if you have chemo brain, you're not going to be as cognitively functionable all the time. And it may be a short period of time, maybe a long period of time. Or if there's an employee that you can help you with some of those very specific tasks that you can't do for a period of time. And so you're going to need to let the doctor know, you know, what your job is And he'll be able to say, you're not going to be able to sit that long, or you're not going to be able to go out there and climb that hill or climb that telephone pole or put in or be out there looking or operating that equipment, because the medication is not going to let you do that. So that's why it's important to talk to your doctor.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We do have time for one or two more questions. If anybody wants to enter something in, and it looks like they do, which is great. I'm on short-term disability with employer. The insurance company forced me to apply for SSDI during STD, and I was approved. For many reasons, I prefer to work as long as possible and intend to return to work next month after stem cell transplant, the same time frame as Social Security disability starts. Can I still return to work if I'm able?
Interesting. If they required you, because it sounds like you may have been off for a while, in order to qualify for them to go through the Social Security disability, and they have approved that, then you probably will not be going back into work, because now you're getting your income through Social Security disability. If you want to continue to work, you may have to decline the Social Security disability. There might be another process, because now they may already have you shown as permanently disabled. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a process for your doctor to look at, and your employer as well. So I would talk to the doctor, get that information from your doctor first, if it is viable for you to go back to work, and then talk to, and then call Social Security office and find out how that normally works. Because, depending on your age, if you leave on Social Security disability and your job says, well, you're on Social Security disability now, you're not going to get employment and we don't have to hold your job, then you may be without a job. And now are you still continue to have insurance? Reach out to me on that one. I'd like to get more of the specifics. I'd like to look at your timelines, some other personal information, or to help you guide you on where you need to go. But please reach out to me, and I'd like to discuss this a little bit further with you.
Let me put that in there really fast while you answer this next question, which is, how can you ask, this is a great question, how can you ask for help with chemo brain if you don't tell your employer that you have cancer? So how can you get those accommodations without revealing that you have cancer?
Okay, very good one. So generally, when you start getting chemo brain, you've already had some other treatments, right? You've had to probably take some time off. You've asked for, you're going to say, I'm taking medications, and it's going to cause me to be forgetful, to be tired, those types of things. So you're not saying I have cancer. You're only saying the effects of your treatment that's not going to allow you to continue to do your job. So be very careful how you word things, which means, you may have to practice at home, get the information. But up to this point, if you have chemo brain, you've already probably gone through other types of treatment. And so you may have had to take time off, whether you've had to take time off for scans, for all kinds of things, and fall back on that. Ask your doctor, how would you address without saying I have cancer? But one thing is saying, I'm taking treatment for an illness, and it's going to cause these issues. I'm not going to be able to remember things as well. I may not be able to remember things as well. I may get tired earlier during the day, and think about, what does chemo brain mean? Ask the doctor, what does chemo brain mean? How does it affect different people? So that you can anticipate what those effects might be. And so that when you go back to your employer and say, this is what's going on, without saying I have cancer, that way you'll have the ammunition you need.
Yeah, I love that. Those were incredible questions and great answers, Diana. I really appreciate this conversation that we've had. Again, I always say this, but I learned so much, so I appreciate it. This is Diana's contact information. You can email her through myfinancialcoach@healthtree.org. Or, the one that we really recommend is going through and creating a free profile on myelomacoach.org, because then you won't only be able to get access to Diana and schedule an appointment with her, but there are many, many other coaches who have different specialties that you might want to become, that you might want to be in contact with as well. And it's totally fine to have more than one coach at the same time. So we just want you to know that free program and resources out there for you. And again, we are sending this, as Diana said, in the follow-up emails, so you'll be able to receive this information. Our next Myeloma Financial Coach meeting will take place on May 4th at 1 p.m. And we are going to be discussing housing and rental laws for tenants with disabilities such as cancer. We are going to have a guest speaker, Attorney Stuart Pope, come speak to us. And this one is important and timely, especially because of what's happening with COVID. And obviously we'll spend a whole month speaking about this, but I am excited about this topic. And even if it might not apply to you, I recommend that you come, or especially that you tell your friends who this might apply to as well, that they come and attend, because this is such a pertinent topic that is on the mind of a lot of cancer patients at this time that might be struggling. We also have other upcoming events in the Myeloma Crowd Community Program that you might be interested in. On Wednesday, April 7th, that's the launch of our immunotherapy treatment chapter. At 4 p.m. Eastern, multiple myeloma specialist Mike Thompson will speak to us about what we know concerning COVID-19 vaccinations and myeloma. Does it work for myeloma patients? How long should you wait before your stem cell transplant to become vaccinated, or after your stem cell transplant to be vaccinated for COVID? And in addition, I guess, is it even worth it to get your vaccination before a stem cell transplant, since you're getting a whole new immune system? Don't miss out on the launch of this exciting chapter with one of our hottest topics. The same day at 7 p.m. Eastern will be our Fitness for Myeloma chapter, and Dr. Jens Hillingas and his wife, Michaela, who is Dr. Jens is a multiple myeloma specialist, Michaela is a personal trainer. They're joining together to share some early data from a study survey done for myeloma patients to see how fitness is affecting them, not only their overall health, but their myeloma progression as well. Again, that's early data, but it's really exciting to hear about. And they're also going to be sharing practical tips for exercising at home, and even some fun exercises to do at home, even if you're not that mobile. Saturday, April 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern is our Myeloma Crowd Roundtable. This is a different program within the Myeloma Crowd. In case you aren't aware, these Myeloma Crowd Roundtables, we have various multiple myeloma specialists come talk about topics, and this topic is BCMA and other targets in myeloma therapy. B-cell maturation agent, BCMA, which is expressed on the surface of virtually all myeloma cells, has been called the perfect target for novel therapies, including antibody-drug conjugates, ADCs, CAR-T, bispecific T-cell engagers, BiTEs or bispecifics, and new immunotherapies like trispecifics. This program will be a deep dive into why these targets are important, how their mechanisms function, and how they're being integrated into myeloma therapy. Finally, Thursday, April 15th, this is what Diana alluded to during her program. At 7 p.m. Eastern is our Myeloma Caregivers chapter. Diana will be joining us as a guest speaker to share her experience as a caregiver, as well as her top recommended financial resources for caregivers to know on their myeloma journey. As we all know, the treatments, the procedures, the secondary costs can really add up. And so I highly recommend that you join us for financial resources for the caregivers, unsung heroes and advocates with Diana Valentine. The link to sign up for any of these events and even more events that I haven't highlighted today can be found at the bottom of this slide, and again will be sent in our follow-up email. Another special thanks to our community sponsors, AbbVie, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Genentech, Karyopharm Therapeutics, Oncopeptides, Adaptive Biotechnologies, and Takeda Oncology. And thank you to each of you for sharing this virtual time with us and helping us grow this myeloma crowd community. We appreciate you, and another thanks to you, Diana, for your time. And we hope that you have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.